What if I told you that Rome's greatest weapon was not the sword, but the shovel? We tend to think of Roman legionnaires as an unstoppable force in battle, marching from victory to victory. But their real hidden power lay not in their ability to fight, but in their ability to simply march. To march without stopping, across any terrain, in any weather, day after day. The Roman army was not just an army, but a giant, self-sufficient organism that moved across the world, paving its own way and changing the landscape itself. Their marches were not just a movement from point A to point B, but an act of conquest, an engineering marvel, and a demonstration of iron discipline. This army could build a bridge across a river faster than other peoples could build a house, and erect an impregnable fortress in a few hours at sunset. Watch the video to the end to find out how the Romans turned a simple infantryman into a versatile soldier engineer. What secret drink allowed them to march for tens of kilometers without fatigue, and why their camps, built in just one night, were more perfect than many cities of that time. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of Roman domination, and it lies not in combat tactics. The foundation on which the entire Roman military machine rested was not the army, but the network of roads that covered the entire empire. Each new road was not just a transport artery, but an instrument of control, a supply line, and a runway for the legions. Imagine a modern army trying to fight without GPS, satellite communications, and a highway system. Roman roads performed all these functions at once. They were the navigation system, communication network, and logistical infrastructure of the ancient world. If you commanded the Roman army, you would understand that every kilometer of paved road was worth more than gold, as it turned unknown territory into controlled space where your troops could move with maximum efficiency. The Romans built roads as if they were waging eternal war, because for them, that was the case. They were straight, ignoring the terrain, cutting through hills and crossing swamps. This was not done for the convenience of merchants, but for the maximum speed of troop movements where every hour counted. The philosophy was simple. A road is a permanent military presence. As long as the road exists, the legions can return to any point in a rebellious province in a matter of days. Therefore, they were built to last for centuries, with multi-layered foundations, drainage systems, and stone surfaces, creating infrastructure that the world had never seen before. The Roman concept of straight roads was revolutionary for its time. While other peoples built roads that bypassed obstacles, the Romans preferred to overcome them. A hill in the way? They cut it down or dug a tunnel through it. A swamp? They built a dam or a causeway on stilts. A river? They built a bridge. This philosophy reflected the Roman mentality. Nature had to submit to human will. The strategic logic was flawless. A direct road meant that legions could appear where they were not expected and before the enemy had time to prepare. Every hour saved on the journey could mean the difference between victory and defeat, between suppressing a rebellion at an early stage and a long and bloody war. For a legionnaire, the road was a guarantee. He knew that reinforcements would come along it, food would be delivered, and messengers with orders would arrive. This created a sense of an unbreakable connection with Rome, even thousands of kilometers away. The soldiers themselves were responsible for building these arteries. Each legionnaire was not only a warrior, but also a civil engineer. The ability to handle a pickaxe and shovel was valued no less than the ability to wield a sword, for it was these tools that conquered space. The psychological effect of Roman roads on soldiers was enormous. Being in a foreign country, surrounded by a hostile population, a legionnaire saw familiar Roman stones under his feet and understood that he was not cut off from civilization. The road was a physical extension of Rome, its hand reaching across continents to every soldier. The legionnaire's engineering skills were the result of systematic training and years of practice. Every soldier knew how to lay the foundation for a road, how to provide drainage, and how to calculate the slope for maximum strength. This knowledge was passed down from generation to generation of military engineers, creating unrivaled expertise in road construction. Roads allowed Rome to move huge numbers of troops at an astonishing speed. The army could suppress a rebellion on the Danube and within a few weeks be at the border with Parthia. This mobility gave Rome a colossal strategic advantage over any opponent. Rome's enemies often found themselves trapped. They could win a single battle, but they could not stop the constant flow of new legions along the built roads. The Roman road was a weapon of attrition that slowly but surely crushed any resistance. The speed of movement of the Roman armies was unprecedented in the ancient world. Legions could cover up to 30-40 kilometers a day on good roads, which was 2 to 3 times faster than enemy armies forced to move off-road. This difference in mobility often decided the outcome of campaigns even before the decisive battles began. The road-based supply system allowed the Romans to wage war at great distances from their bases. Wagons carrying food, equipment, and reinforcements could reach the most remote fronts, ensuring the stability of the Roman military presence anywhere in the empire. Thus, it was the road network that fed the army and allowed it to march forever. It was the skeleton of the empire that supported the muscles of the legions. Without roads, the army would have been just a crowd, but with them, it was an indestructible force. The road itself was the first step towards conquest, even before the battle began. It determined in advance the routes, logistics, and, to a large extent, the outcome of the future campaign. The Roman Empire was built not only with the sword, but also with the stone laid at the foundation of their great roads. Road construction was a form of psychological warfare. Local tribes saw the Romans methodically and relentlessly laying stone paths across their lands and understood that this was not a temporary occupation, but a permanent presence. The roads symbolized the inevitability of Roman domination and the futility of resistance. The economic aspect of roads was also important for military purposes. The developed trade that flourished along Roman roads provided the tax revenue necessary to maintain the army. The roads created a self-sustaining system. Trade financed the army, and the army protected trade. What do you think? Was a shovel more important to a Roman soldier than a sword? Are you ready to learn the truth about what a legionnaire actually carried? His equipment was an ingenious compromise between protection, combat effectiveness, and the ability to carry it all for dozens of kilometers. Each item was standardized and thought out to the smallest detail to turn a soldier into a self-sufficient combat unit. Imagine a modern infantryman who has to carry everything he needs to survive autonomously for weeks, plus full combat gear, and be ready for battle at any moment. Roman legionnaires faced exactly this task, but without modern lightweight materials and ergonomic backpacks. If you tried to repeat a Roman march with authentic equipment, you would quickly realize that every gram of weight was carefully calculated and that each item served multiple functions. The total weight of the equipment carried by a legionnaire could reach 45 kilograms. This is comparable to the weight of a modern hiking backpack, but it was distributed much more intelligently. The center of gravity was shifted to minimize the load on the back during long journeys. The basis of the marching equipment was the so-called sarcina, the soldier's personal luggage, attached to a T-shaped pole. This pole, which the legionnaire carried on his shoulder, allowed him to quickly drop his load before battle. The sarcina contained everything necessary for life on the march. The ergonomics of Roman equipment were the result of centuries of evolution and practical experience. The T-shaped pole, or furca, distributed the load between the shoulder and the arm, allowing the soldier to carry more weight with less effort. This system was much more effective than a modern backpack in terms of quickly releasing the load. With a single movement, the soldier could drop all his luggage and prepare for battle. Calculations show that 45 kilograms accounted for about 60–70% of the legionnaire's own weight. Modern armies consider 35% of a soldier's body weight to be a critical load, which makes Roman standards truly extreme. There was a leather bag with personal belongings, a pot for cooking, and a supply of provisions for several days. In addition, each soldier carried the tools necessary for building a camp. These were a pickaxe hoe known as a dolabra, a basket for carrying earth, and a saw. In addition to his personal belongings, the legionnaire also carried full combat gear. This included a helmet, armor, a large rectangular shield called a scutum, and 2 throwing spears called pilums. A short sword called a gladius, the main weapon for close combat, hung from his belt. Every item in the sarcina was multifunctional. The pot was used not only for cooking, but also as additional head protection in extreme situations. The leather bag was waterproof and could be used as an improvised boat for crossing small bodies of water. The delabra combined the functions of a pickaxe, a hoe, and a weapon. Provisions were calculated for 3 to 4 days of autonomous existence and included grain, salted meat, crackers, and salt. This supply allowed the Legion to operate independently of supply lines in critical situations. The pole with the load that the soldiers carried on their shoulders was nicknamed Mules of Marius in honor of the commander Gaius Marius, who carried out this reform. It significantly reduced the size of the baggage train, making the legions less dependent on slow transport. The army became faster and more mobile. Standardization played a key role. Every helmet, every sword, every shield was made to a single design. This not only simplified production and repair, but also created a unified, intimidating appearance for the army on the battlefield. The reforms of Marius around 107 BC revolutionized Roman military logistics. Before that, armies depended on huge convoys of pack animals, which slowed down movement and required protection. By turning each soldier into a self-sufficient unit, Marius increased the speed of legion movement by 2-3 times. The standardization of equipment was a breakthrough in military production. Uniform standards allowed weapons and armor to be mass-produced in specialized workshops rather than by individual armorers. This reduced costs and improved the quality of equipment. The entire system was designed with one goal in mind. Soldiers must be able to fight at any moment. Even after a 20-kilometer march, they had to have the strength to drop their packs, set up camp, and, if necessary, engage in battle. This required superhuman endurance. Thus, a legionnaire's equipment was not just a set of items. It was a carefully thought-out system that combined mobility, autonomy, and combat readiness. Each soldier was a small fortress on the march. The concept of the soldier fortress was unique to the ancient world. A legionnaire could survive independently on a campaign, build fortifications, prepare food, and fight with full effectiveness. This versatility made the Roman armies incredibly adaptable to any conditions and situations. The psychological effect of uniform equipment was also important. Enemies saw not a motley crowd, but a united iron wall of identically equipped and trained warriors. This made a frightening impression even before the battle began. But how could a person carry such weight and walk enormous distances day after day? The secret lay not only in muscle strength, but also in what fueled their bodies. Ready to find out what simple drink gave the legionnaires the strength for their legendary marches? What you have never seen is the menu of a simple Roman soldier, and therein lies the secret of his endurance. The Roman army did not win because of its exquisite cuisine, but because of the most efficient and well-thought-out food system in the ancient world. Food logistics was elevated to an art form where the main principles were calorie content and ease of transport. Imagine a modern sports team where each athlete receives a personally tailored diet for maximum performance. The Roman army used a similar scientific approach, but on a scale of tens of thousands of people and without modern knowledge of nutrition. If you were responsible for feeding an army operating for months away from civilization, you would understand the genius of the Roman solution. To create a system where each soldier receives the optimal fuel for his body while minimizing logistical difficulties. The basis of a legionnaire's diet was grain, mainly wheat. Each soldier received a daily ration in the form of whole grains, not ready-made bread. This was an ingenious logistical solution, as grain can be stored much longer and takes up less space. The soldiers ground their own grain using small hand mills, which they carried with them in groups of several per tent. This daily task was part of the army routine. The flour obtained was used to bake unleavened flatbread or cook a thick porridge known as pulse. The daily grain ration was about 850 grams per person, which provided approximately 3,000 calories, corresponding to the energy needs of a person engaged in heavy physical labor. Whole wheat grains retained their nutritional properties for months, unlike flour, which quickly became rancid and lost its vitamins. The grinding process was not just routine work, but an important social ritual that united the soldiers of the contubernum. The hand mills weighed several kilograms each, but provided fresh flour every day. This work developed not only the muscles of the arms, but also team spirit. 8 people had to coordinate their actions to work effectively. Such a diet, rich in complex carbohydrates, provided slow-release energy, ideal for prolonged physical exertion. It was the fuel that allowed the legions to march from dawn to dusk. Protein foods such as cheese, beans, or occasionally meat were only a supplement. But the Roman soldier's main secret was his drink, pasca. It was a mixture of water and sour wine or wine vinegar. By modern standards, the taste may seem strange, but for a legionnaire, it was the elixir of life. The scientific basis for a grain-based diet is impressive. Complex carbohydrates provide stable blood glucose levels for many hours, preventing energy slumps. The fiber in whole grains aids digestion, and B vitamins support the nervous system under stress. Pasca was an ancient isotonic drink. Its acidity helped the body absorb minerals, especially iron, which is critically important for people who lose it through sweat and microtrauma. The ratio of water to vinegar was empirically found to be the optimum balance between taste and beneficial effect. The acetic acid contained in pasca had antiseptic properties, disinfecting water from questionable sources. This greatly reduced the risk of intestinal infections, the main scourge of all ancient armies. In addition, this drink was excellent for quenching thirst and, according to some sources, helped to restore salt balance. The supply system was impeccably organized. Huge grain storage warehouses were built along the borders and main routes. This allowed the army to start a campaign at any moment without wasting time gathering provisions. The microbiological effect of pasca was revolutionary for the ancient world. In an era when cholera and dysentery could destroy an army faster than any enemy, Roman legions had a significantly lower incidence of intestinal infections. Acetic acid created a hostile environment for most pathogenic microorganisms. The Roman army's logistics system was a masterpiece of organization. Horea, military warehouses, were located at intervals of 1 day's march and could supply an entire legion for a month. The requisitioning system allowed supplies to be replenished in conquered territories, but the base warehouses guaranteed independence from local resources. The Romans understood that a hungry army was an army incapable of fighting. Therefore, the quartermasters responsible for supplies were among the most important people in the legion. The success of the entire military operation depended on their work. Thus, a legionnaire's diet was not just a set of foods. It was a carefully calculated system designed to maintain maximum physical performance. Simple, high-calorie, and safe food was as much a weapon as the gladius. The psychology of nutrition also played a role. The ritual of cooking together strengthened the brotherhood in arms, and the certainty of regular supplies kept morale high. The soldiers knew that they were being taken care of, that they would not be left to starve in a foreign country. It was this food system that allowed tens of thousands of people to function smoothly away from civilization. It gave them the energy for endless marches and the strength for construction and battle. The Roman Empire moved forward on the stomachs of its soldiers. What if I showed you a time machine and we traveled to a single day in the life of a Roman legion on the march? It was not a chaotic journey, but a strictly regulated process honed to perfection. Every day was similar to the previous one, and it was this monotonous routine that made the army so effective. The day began long before dawn. After a modest breakfast, the legionaries folded up their leather tents and gathered their belongings. At the sound of a trumpet, the legion lined up in a marching column in a strict, predetermined order. The march proceeded at a steady pace set by the centurions. Usually the legion marched for about 50 minutes, after which there was a 10-minute rest. This allowed the soldiers to catch their breath, adjust their equipment, and drink water. There were two main types of marches. The usual daily march, or istometer, was about 20 Roman miles, which is approximately 30 kilometers. The entire army had to cover this distance in 7 to 8 hours on a summer day. If necessary, the legion could switch to a forced march, or magnum iter. In this mode, soldiers covered up to 30 miles, or 45 kilometers, carrying their full equipment. This required incredible physical and mental effort. Discipline on the march was ironclad. Centurions made sure that no one fell behind or broke ranks. Any sign of weakness or disobedience was severely punished. Because the safety of the entire column depended on the coordination of the movement was organized with a possible attack in mind. The best units marched at the front and rear, while scouts moved along the flanks. The baggage train, if there was one, was in the center of the column under reliable protection. This daily routine turned soldiers into a single mechanism. They got used to the strain, the rhythm of movement, and the weight of their equipment. Marching became as natural to them as breathing. Roman soldiers spent most of their service on campaigns. Years spent in endless marches along the roads of the empire tempered his body and spirit. He became part of a machine that knew no fatigue. A long march is one thing, but where did this huge army of tens of thousands of men spend each night surrounded by hostile tribes while remaining completely safe? In the next chapter, you will learn how they built an impregnable fortress in just a few hours. The Roman army never spent the night in an unprotected place. Wherever their day's march took them, at the end of the day they always erected a fortified camp, or castrum. It was not just a place to sleep, but a full-fledged military base, built from scratch in a matter of hours. As soon as the legion arrived at the intended overnight location, engineers and surveyors were sent ahead. They chose a suitable site, usually on high ground and close to a water source. Then they marked out the contours of the future camp on the ground with poles and flags. The camp plan was always the same, regardless of location and circumstances. It was a perfect rectangle, divided into 4 equal parts by 2 perpendicular streets. Every cohort, every centurion, every soldier knew their exact place in this plan. As soon as the main part of the legion approached the marked territory, work began. The soldiers threw down their luggage and picked up their tools. The work proceeded with incredible speed and coordination, resembling the work of a giant anthill. The first task was to dig a ditch, or fosso, around the perimeter of the camp. The excavated earth was used to create a rampart, or agger, on the inside of the ditch. The depth of the ditch and the height of the rampart depended on the perceived threat, but even in the simplest version, they were a serious obstacle. The top of the rampart was reinforced with a palisade. Each legionnaire carried 2 pointed stakes, which were joined together to form an impenetrable wall. As a result, in just 3 or 4 hours, a fortress capable of withstanding a sudden attack would spring up from nothing. Inside the camp, everything was in perfect order. The tents were set up in neat rows in strictly designated areas. In the center was the commander's tent, headquarters, and altar, where the legion's insignia were kept. This standardization was of great importance. Any soldier, even if he had been transferred from another legion, could instantly find his bearings in the camp. He knew exactly where his tent was, where the warehouse was, and where the gate was through which he had to exit in case of an alarm. The night camp was not only a fortress, but also a symbol of Roman order amid barbarian chaos. It gave the soldiers a sense of security and confidence. Within these walls, they were part of Rome, an indestructible civilization. In the morning, the camp was dismantled just as quickly. The moat was filled in, and the legion continued on its way. But a clear rectangular scar remained on the ground, silent testimony that the indestructible army of Rome had stopped here. It was a message to any enemy. We can build such a fortress anywhere and any time. What if I told you that the secret weapon of the legions was not swords, but mathematics? Within each legion, there was a large group of soldiers who were exempt from daily labor. They were called immunes and were the brain center of the army. Its engineers, architects, surveyors, and handymen. These specialists were the true elite of the legion. They underwent special training and possessed knowledge that was unavailable to ordinary soldiers. They were the ones who designed roads, bridges, aqueducts, and siege engines. The most important among them were the surveyors, or grammatici, using simple tools such as a groma for marking right angles and a korobatis for determining levels. They could mark out the most complex structures on the ground. Their accuracy was remarkable. It was the grammatici who were responsible for marking out the perfect rectangle of the military camp. They ensured the straightness of the Roman roads, which led to their destination regardless of obstacles. They were the eyes and mind of the legion, transforming the chaos of nature into an orderly space. The architects and engineers of the legion supervised all construction work. They calculated the strength of bridges, the height of siege towers, and the thickness of fortress walls. Their knowledge of mechanics and material science allowed them to create grandiose structures in the shortest possible time. Numerous craftsmen worked alongside them. Blacksmiths repaired weapons and tools, carpenters built bridges and siege engines, and stonecutters worked stone for roads. The Legion was completely self-sufficient in technical terms. These specialist soldiers were not just executors. They were bearers of unique technologies that Rome had accumulated over centuries. Their knowledge was passed down from generation to generation, constantly improving. The Roman army was not just a fighting force, but a giant mobile construction organization. It carried civilization on the tips of its spears and in the drawings of its engineers. Each newly conquered territory was immediately covered with a network of roads, bridges, and cities built by the hands of soldiers. It was thanks to these nameless engineers that the legions were able to overcome any obstacle. They transformed the army from a simple mass of people into a complex organism capable of changing the world around them to suit their needs. Their work was not as visible as the exploits on the battlefield, but it was no less important for victory. We have seen how they marched and built camps, but how did they deal with the main obstacles in their path? Rivers? In the next chapter, we will see how Roman engineers challenged nature itself by building bridges where it seemed impossible. For most armies of antiquity, a wide and fast-flowing river was an insurmountable obstacle capable of halting an entire invasion. For the Roman legions, it was just another engineering problem to be solved. The ability to quickly build crossings was one of the key factors in their remarkable mobility. Imagine a modern army that can build a temporary bridge across a large river in a matter of days using only hand tools and local materials. Roman legionaries did just that on a regular basis, turning natural obstacles into tactical advantages. If you commanded an army opposing Rome and relied on the defensive function of a river, you would find that the Romans not only crossed the water barrier, but also used the process of building a bridge as a demonstration of their technological power and the inevitability of conquest. The simplest and fastest way to cross was to build pontoon bridges. This was done using light boats or empty barrels tied together, which were lined up across the river. Planks were laid on top of them to create a floating road. Such a bridge could be assembled in a few hours, allowing the army to quickly cross the water barrier and take the enemy by surprise. All components for pontoon bridges were often transported in the legion's baggage train. It was a well-established and standardized technology. Pontoon bridges were an engineering solution optimized for speed of deployment. Each boat or pontoon had standard dimensions and fastenings, allowing soldiers to assemble the structure like a modern construction set. An experienced team could build a pontoon bridge across a 100-meter wide river in 4 to 6 hours, including the time to prepare the approaches on both banks. The materials for the pontoons were carefully considered in terms of weight and functionality. Empty wine amphorae, securely sealed with corks and wax, provided excellent buoyancy with minimal weight. Special flat-bottomed boats were designed for quick assembly of the bridge deck. However, more reliable structures were required for longer use or for transporting heavy siege engines. In this case, the legionaries built wooden bridges on stilts. This process was a demonstration of their supreme engineering skill and organization. One of the most famous examples is the bridge built by Julius Caesar's army across the Rhine River. In just 10 days, the legionaries erected a grandiose structure about 400 meters long. This was done in strong currents and on enemy territory. The construction technology was remarkably effective. Pairs of piles, sharpened at the end, were driven into the riverbed at an angle to each other using special pile drivers mounted on rafts. This inclined structure gave the supports incredible stability against the current. Caesar's bridge over the Rhine remains one of the greatest engineering feats of antiquity. Construction was carried out simultaneously from several points, which required exceptional coordination between the various construction crews. Each pile was about 10 meters long and weighed several hundred kilograms. Their manufacture, transportation, and installation required the participation of hundreds of people. The copras, lifting mechanisms for driving the piles, were complex wooden structures with a system of blocks and counterweights. They were installed on special rafts that had to hold their position in the strong current of the Rhine. This required not only engineering knowledge, but also an understanding of hydrodynamics. Massive cross beams were laid on top of the piles and connected with longitudinal beams. Planks were laid on this frame, and the bridge was ready. All the details were calculated and fitted in advance, which allowed construction to proceed at conveyor speed. This bridge across the Rhine did not have purely military significance, as Caesar soon dismantled it. It was an act of intimidation, a demonstration of Rome's power and technological superiority. He showed the Germanic tribes that there were no barriers for the Roman army. The system of pre-preparation of materials was a key factor in the success. The beams were cut and processed in advance, and the connecting elements were manufactured to uniform standards. This allowed assembly to be carried out with minimal adjustments on site. Each element of the structure had its place in the overall scheme, which eliminated errors and delays. The psychological effect of destroying the bridge was no less important than that of building it. Caesar demonstrated that he could appear at any time and in any place, and then disappear, leaving the enemy no opportunity to use Roman infrastructure. This created a sense of total control over the space. The ability to build bridges gave the legions freedom of maneuver. They were not tied to fords or existing crossings that could be defended by the enemy. They chose where and when to cross the river, always imposing their will. These bridges, built in the middle of the wilderness, were as much a symbol of Roman power as their roads. They showed that Roman order and discipline could conquer any natural chaos. There were no insurmountable barriers for the legions. The strategic importance of bridge-building skills went far beyond simply overcoming water obstacles. It was a tool of psychological warfare, demonstrating to the enemy the technical superiority and inevitability of Roman domination. Tribes that saw how the Romans could build in a matter of days what they themselves could not achieve understood the futility of resisting such civilizational power. The entire complex system of the Roman army, from road construction to battlefield tactics, rested on the shoulders of one man, the centurion. These were professional officers who formed the backbone of the legion. Without their experience, courage, and brutal discipline, the army would never have become what it was. Centurions were not aristocrats. They came from the ranks of ordinary soldiers, rising to their rank through valor and intelligence. They were veterans of countless campaigns and battles who knew war firsthand. Their authority among the soldiers was unquestionable. A centurion was in charge of a centuria, a unit of about 80 men. He was responsible for all aspects of their lives: training, discipline, supplies, and morale. He was a commander, mentor, and judge to his soldiers. It was the centurions who were the main enforcers of the famous Roman discipline. They maintained order on the march, monitored the quality of construction work, and led their men into battle, fighting in the front lines. Their vine-made staff was a symbol of authority and a tool for punishing the negligent. On the march, the centurion walked alongside his soldiers, setting the pace and keeping an eye on the formation. He personally checked how they carried their equipment and did not allow anyone to fall behind. His presence forced the legionaries to endure loads that seemed impossible. During the construction of the camp, the centurions assigned tasks and supervised the work. They were responsible for ensuring that their section of the moat and rampart was completed on time and in accordance with standards. The safety of the entire legion depended on their exacting standards. Unlike senior commanders, who often changed for political reasons, centurions served in the army for decades. They were the bearers of the legion's traditions and combat experience. It was they who turned recruits into seasoned veterans. The centurion system provided the army with stability and professionalism at the grassroots level. Even if the legion was commanded by an inexperienced commander, experienced centurions could ensure that the combat mission was accomplished. They were the foundation on which the entire structure rested. The centurion was the embodiment of the ideal Roman warrior: resilient, disciplined, brave, and devoted to Rome. These men were the real driving force behind Rome's military machine. Their will built the empire. One of the main reasons why ancient armies lost more men to disease than in battle was poor sanitation. The Romans, with their practical approach to everything, recognized this problem and created the most advanced system of military medicine and hygiene of their time. This allowed them to maintain the combat effectiveness of their legions on long campaigns. Each legion had its own staff of professional medics, or medici. They organized hospitals, provided first aid on the battlefield, and monitored the overall sanitary condition of the army. The existence of an organized medical service was unique in the ancient world. Great attention was paid to disease prevention. The main rule was to provide soldiers with clean drinking water. When choosing a place for a camp, proximity to unpolluted sources was always taken into account. and during long stops, small aqueducts could even be built. The camp was arranged in such a way as to minimize the risk of spreading infections. Special areas were set aside for waste and toilets, away from tents and water sources. These simple hygiene measures made it possible to avoid epidemics that devastated enemy armies. Roman military doctors possessed knowledge that was advanced for their time. They were skilled in performing complex surgical operations using instruments, many of which have remained virtually unchanged to this day. They understood the importance of cleanliness when treating wounds. Permanent fortresses and camps had full-fledged hospitals, or valetudinaria. These were well-planned buildings with wards for the wounded, operating rooms, and even baths. The level of medical care was comparable to modern field hospitals. The soldiers' diet, although simple, was balanced and provided them with the necessary calories. The use of pasca, a vinegar-based drink, also played an important role in disinfecting water and preventing disease. An army that eats well gets sick less often. This systematic approach to the health of soldiers gave Rome a huge advantage. Legions could operate away from their bases for months without losing their combat effectiveness due to disease. While enemy armies were decimated by dysentery and typhus, the Romans remained healthy and full of strength. Healthcare was part of the overall system of maintaining the army's effectiveness. The Romans understood that every soldier was a valuable resource, whose training required years and resources. Losing him due to poor water or infection was an unforgivable luxury. Physical endurance and engineering skills were important, but they would not have worked without the main component, the special psychological attitude of the Roman soldier. Legionnaires were trained to develop a mentality that allowed them to endure the monotony and hardship of endless marches. At the heart of this was the famous Roman discipline. For the Romans, the word discipline meant more than just obeying orders. It was a whole system of values that included diligence, endurance, self-control, and dedication to duty. Discipline was the inner core that kept soldiers from breaking down. Endless training and drills made all actions automatic. Soldiers did not think about how to pitch a tent or dig a trench. Their bodies did it automatically. This automatism saved mental energy and allowed them to act effectively, even in a state of extreme fatigue. Team spirit played a crucial role. A legionnaire was part of his tent group, his centuria, his cohort, and his legion. He marched, built, fought, and survived alongside his comrades, and this sense of camaraderie helped him overcome any difficulties. The system of rewards and punishments was a powerful incentive. For bravery, a soldier could receive a cash bonus, a promotion, or an honorary award. But for cowardice or breach of discipline, he faced severe punishment, up to and including the most extreme measures. Morale was sustained by faith in the greatness of Rome and in their own invincibility. Legionnaires saw how their labor was changing the world. Roads, cities, and fortresses were springing up in place of wild forests. They felt themselves to be the bearers of civilization and order. The very routine of marching and building camps had a therapeutic effect. It structured time and left soldiers no opportunity for reflection or despondency. While you are working, you do not think about fear or fatigue. At the end of their service, veterans received a generous reward, a substantial cash allowance or a plot of land in one of the colonies. This goal, to ensure a dignified old age, was a powerful motivation that made them endure all the hardships of service. It was this combination of factors, strict discipline, collectivism, a system of motivation, and belief in one's destiny, that created a special type of person. The Roman legionnaire was psychologically prepared to march forever. He was a cog in a machine that did not know the meaning of impossible. We can see that the Roman army's ability to march endlessly was not the result of a single trick, but of a complex system honed over centuries. It was a brilliant synthesis of engineering, sophisticated logistics, effective medicine, and iron discipline. Rome conquered the world not only because its soldiers fought better, but because they could reach any battlefield fully prepared. Roads that crisscrossed continents, equipment that turned a soldier into an autonomous fortress, a diet that provided energy, camps that appeared out of nowhere. All these were parts of a single mechanism, a mechanism that was set in motion by the will of the centurions and built by the hands of the legionaries themselves, who were equally skilled with the sword and the shovel. We can still see the legacy of this system today in the straight, arrow-like roads that still crisscross Europe, and in the very principle of organizing any modern army. Rome proved that wars are won not only on the battlefield, but also on the march, long before the first clash with the enemy. Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new research into the military tricks of the past.